Well, we're now wrapping up the first week of the fall session, as stated, a week that began cordially, even if only for a moment. Take a look.
I thank the Prime Minister for calling a prompt by-election. I wonder if one day he might regret that decision.
He may notice a few things have changed since he was here last.
But that collegiality soon gave way to the business of Parliament. And to tell us about how Canadians are feeling of our political leaders right now, we are joined by Philippe Fournier, the founder and the writer of 338 Canada, and Eric Grenier, founder and writer of the Writ. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Good evening, Michael.
Okay, listen, let's begin with how Canadians are feeling right now about the parties. Because, you know, to these layman eyes, it looks like the numbers have not changed that much since the vote. Eric, I'll get you to start us off.
Yeah, I really don't think we've seen much change in the voting intention since the last election. A couple polls have sometimes the Liberals a little bit higher, sometimes they're a little bit lower. We see the same thing for the Conservatives. NDP seems to be a little bit higher than they were on election night. But I think overall, I'm not seeing a lot of regret on the part of Canadians for any of their voting choices, which means if an election were held today, very likely we'd have a very similar outcome to what we had back in April.
Okay, so Philippe, does that mean then that Mark Carney's honeymoon with Canadians is still ongoing?
Well, that's a good question. I will be able to answer that maybe next month, because summer polling, when Parliament is not sitting, it captures the mood of Canadians. But can we really gauge where the honeymoon is going? We saw the satisfaction number for Mr. Carney going down in several pollsters, but it's still well in positive territory, including where it matters for the Liberals, BC, Ontario, and Quebec. And so for now, I would say it's the status quo.
Okay, status quo with some softening when it comes to satisfaction. But, you know, we did see Pierre Poilievre back in the House after winning the August by-election in Battle River Crowfoot. But his favorability numbers, when you look at that, they still trail Mark Carney's quite substantially. So I'll get both of you to weigh in on this, beginning with you, Eric. What does this tell you about the task ahead for Pierre Poilievre, or perhaps the Conservative Party membership as they approach a review in January?
I think this is the big challenge for Pierre Poilievre, is that his numbers have not gotten better since the last election, and his numbers weren't good enough to win that election. So not only does he need to gain some support among Canadians, regain some support that he had lost after Justin Trudeau's resignation, he does have to improve his personal numbers. They are, in some measures, getting actually worse than they were in the election. And I think this is the biggest danger for him, because an election, when it comes down to it, is still a choice between two different options. When it was Pierre Poilievre versus Justin Trudeau, people liked Pierre Poilievre. When it was Pierre Poilievre versus Mark Carney, they liked Mark Carney. And we're not seeing that gap has been reduced at all. So while Pierre Poilievre has some work to do to get his numbers up in general, he especially needs to get his numbers up in comparison to Mark Carney. Because as long as Mark Carney is still preferred on a lot of major issues over Pierre Poilievre, Poilievre's not going to win an election.
Yeah. Eric, what do you say? Excuse me, Philippe, what do you say to that?
Well, I mean, when we break down the results, you saw the numbers from the Angus Street Institute, and breaking down the results by region, by gender, by gender and age, we see how dire the situation is for Mr. Poilievre. He is still beloved by conservative voters. In fact, 84% of those who voted conservatives in April say they still have a favorable view of Poilievre. But however, it doesn't go across partisan lines. Whereas when you look at the numbers from Mark Carney, yes, of course, Liberals like him, but he still gets some support from NDP voters, from Bloc voters. And so Pierre Poilievre really has to grow his base, especially in this new two-party environment.
Mm-hmm. Now, you know, interestingly, I was in Toronto when the Liberal cabinet had, you know, what would have been called a retreat in the past, but their planning session, if you will. And Leger briefed the cabinet about Canadian priorities. And while, you know, Trump in the trade war certainly led the Liberals to victory during the campaign, as we heard from Leger, that's no longer the number one issue amongst Canadians. Affordability is once again the number one issue. So I wonder then, how does that shift in priority potentially hurt the Prime Minister's numbers, potentially help the Conservative leader's numbers? Philippe, I'll get you to start.
Well, I will say on this that the promises of Mark Carney when he did the campaign was to eventually solve the U.S.-Canada trade partnership. This hasn't been done yet. I think many Canadians are patient, but their fuse will be very short if it's not fixed by, let's say, next spring, especially in the light of a very big deficit that is awaiting the federal government. And so for now, I would still say there's patience, but it may not last.
Eric?
Yeah, I think it's natural that Canadians are getting a little bit of Trump fatigue. I mean, seeing him on the news all the time, everybody gets kind of tired of it after a while. And we have seen that those other issues like cost of living have been topping the polls. But it's really hard to decouple those two. If we do have, as Philippe says, we don't have some resolutions to some of these issues we have with the United States over the longer term, that will impact cost of living. So I do think that it is still an important issue in the sense that while Canadians might not be thinking about Donald Trump every day, if Mark Carney does deliver on that, then it will help him on the other issues. So Donald Trump, in many ways, he might not always be top of mind, but he's always kind of there. And I think that that's not going to go away as long as he's in the White House.
Okay. Well, listen, the session is underway. Happy to have the two of you back on the program. Happy to be back on air. So I look forward to more conversations. Eric, Philippe, thank you for this.
Thanks.
Thank you, Michael.